Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Hello and welcome to the Women's Roundtable podcast powered by the Think Factory, where we learn how women think big and grow their business. My name is Susan Kleiner. I'm a partner with Outside General Counsel Solutions, and I'm the host of today's episode. I'm happy to have here with me today April Lopez. April is the CEO of the Recovery Empowerment Network in Arizona. She started her career at Ren in May 2014 and held a whole bunch of roles before becoming CEO. She has a master's in psychology from Grand Canyon University, a bachelor's degree in psychology from Texas A&M, an associate's degree in criminal justice. While focusing on the behavioral health field, April's dedication to investing in others led her to achieve a couple more certifications. She's a certified nonprofit accounting professional. She's got her behavioral health tech certificate, confidentiality, HIPAA. She's got some fundraising. She's been to a fundraising academy and has been to other studies, postgraduate studies concerning philanthropy, nonprofit innovation, social impact measurement. It's a whole lot of school. April has given her heart and her time to volunteering for nonprofits for the past 20 years. And she is absolutely passionate, which comes through, regarding behavioral health, mental health. And this all stems from her own personal experience through family and friends affected by behavioral health. Welcome, April, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. So first off, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the Recovery Empowerment Network, which you guys call REN. What makes it different from other organizations?
So REN is really neat because it is a peer-led organization. So oftentimes in behavioral health, you go in and you see someone who has a whole lot of education like I do, and they can officially wear that white coat and come at things from a very clinical perspective. Unfortunately, they do not typically have a personal perspective when it comes to behavioral health and substance use. And so that is what's amazing about this nonprofit and the people that we employ at our nonprofit is every single person has personal lived experience, either in behavioral health themselves, so they themselves have a diagnosis, or they have a substance use experience, they have criminal justice experience, or like myself, they have a family experience. And so every person comes with a different aspect of that situation or their diagnosis or what led them to be a peer, but they can come from it from a place of I've been on the streets too, or I have experienced that too, and understand how hard things are versus from a clinical perspective of I read in the textbooks once, this is the diagnosis and these are the symptoms. Knowing what symptoms are and experiencing symptoms are two very different places. And you can get a lot of, compassion and understanding by having lived and walked that path versus reading it in a textbook.
Oh, for sure. I imagine that, for the people you serve, your clients, the fact that it's peer-led has to make a really big difference for them in how they are receive those services and how they feel supported. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it definitely kind of gets rid of the very cold clinical experience that you often have. It definitely feels more like a friendship, which means you have to be really vigilant on boundaries and understanding that it is still a professional relationship, but it definitely feels more like coming home and hanging out with your friends and family and experiencing that friendship versus walking into a counseling appointment or a psychologist appointment where they're very concerned about, have you taken your meds? How are your side effects? How are your symptoms? We say, how are you? Would you like breakfast this morning? And so it's amazing the impact that it can have on somebody's life, especially if they're isolated, which oftentimes with mental illness that they are. And with that isolation becomes, more depression and more symptoms. And so by getting that socialization and the connection and somebody that cares how they doing on a personal level versus just how are they doing on a clinical level makes a huge impact on their ability to do better in their personal lives and even at times in their professional lives.
Okay. And I imagine also, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about behavioral health, mental health, mental wellness is stigma, right? The stigma associated with, getting these services, taking medication, et cetera. I imagine being a peer recovery network and offering these peer services does a lot towards ending stigma, or at least helping your clients out with the destigmatization. Yeah, can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it is definitely something that education needs to be continued on. And what's sad is the stigma causes fear on both sides. For the person that has the mental illness or the substance use or the criminal justice history, they have fear of being unaccepted. They have fear of people judging them. They have fear of people thinking negatively about them. And so that continues to escalate the situations that are going on in their mind and what they think of themselves. And it has a huge impact on how they feel about themselves. And then for the community at large, when they don't understand mental illness and they stigmatize that person, then they are fearful of the person, whether they've been to jail or they've been in substance use or they've had a mental illness. And so at times when not doing well with our mental health, we can be very loud and vocal and not follow social norms. And so that can be very scary for some people. However, getting people in the community understanding this is what it is, this is the situation. If you remain calm, they can remain calm and we can move forward, is really able to reduce that stigma for not only the community, but for our members. And so we do things like take our members to the museums, to the movie theater, out to malls, to get used to being out in public and reduce some of the stigma that they're feeling, being out with other people, and working on normalizing those kind of social environments. And then it also allows others in the community to get to know people with a mental illness or a background in those kind of ways, and in a safe way where they learn that's not so scary after all. They're just people like us. Like all of us at some point feel sadness or, what could be described as depression. We all feel anxious or anxiety and things like that. And so being able to show individuals that have not experienced what's considered a serious mental illness that they too experience some of the symptoms that others are experiencing. It gives them kind of that insight into what it's really like and understanding that they have emotions and so do these other individuals and that both are important.
Right. And then providing these individuals with a serious mental illness with the support while they're going out into the community is more likely to ensure their success with those types of situations. So
Absolutely.
Actually, that's like kind of a great segue because I'd love to hear some more about what type of programs does Ren have and what are the type of clientele that you serve? Because, and just talking to you and looking at your website, you do a lot. So could you just give me a little bit of a rundown in case people are interested? And of course, we'll give them your website too so they can read all about it, but it's just kind of amazing, all the programs you have.
Yeah. So one of the neat things is a lot of our stuff is put together either by something that our staff are excited about or something our members are excited about. So Ren started as a co-located option for people that went to a clinic with serious mental illness only. So it's an SMI diagnosis in Arizona. It's an actual diagnosis here in the state of Arizona, and it entitles them to certain rights and services for their mental health. And so we had been co-located at clinical locations around the state. We are now a standalone organization. And so it just started really as like group kind of therapy where everybody was coming together at the same place and able to have a conversation and have that conversation with other people who had been in their path and had kind of made it through what they considered their recovery journey and was now working towards helping other individuals. And then we said, hey, what could be fun is if we did some other things. And so the members were like, well, could we do more art projects? And so we have like member art all over our building. Then we had members that said, hey, we would really like something for just us, our teenage selves. And so we have our hero program for 18 to 26 because they're like, we're kind of doing our own thing that's more cool over here. So we created a program for that. Later on, we created our Teen Connections for our 13 to 17-year-olds because we identified that we could support them as well. We do big events every single month. We've got recovery reels where members can learn to develop their own film about their recovery. They're short 2 to 3 minute films, and they learn how to direct them, act in them, do the lighting, the cameras, everything that comes to doing a film. And definitely more like an indie film than like Hollywood, but it's still a lot of fun to see. We have a podcast as well. We have our PFRC department, which is our peer and family referral department. So we say if you don't love us, that's no problem. There's lots of peer and family organizations out there. We will take our members to go tour the competition. And if they love them, then we get them set up and referred over there because we want people to get help no matter where they're doing it at and make that transition as easy as possible because it's scary navigating the system. It's scary not knowing what the next step is, how to fill out a referral, how to get to that place the first time, and those kind of things. So we'll walk with them hand in hand to make sure that happens. We also have recovery support training, which will teach an individual how to be a peer support so they could get a job like we have. And then we have peer employment services. So if somebody's gone through all of our services, they've loved it all, they're doing really great, we're no longer using, we're very stable, they might be ready to go back to work. And so we'll walk through that process with them. So I always kind of say we're A through Z, like whether you've not left your home in 10 years and you have high anxiety and you have some goals you want to work on and we need to come meet you in the community, to you're doing really great, we had a stumble and now we're back up on our feet and we want to get back to work, we've got a service for that as well. And so we try to get anything in between and then anything that somebody thinks sounds fun. Because if the members are excited or my staff are excited about doing something, that is going to be way more fun than me saying, today you're going to talk about communication and you have no option. Or today you're going to talk about boundaries and this is what you have to do. And so we really encourage the members' insight and the staff's insight because if they're excited and they're intrigued in what they're doing, then they're going to take that information so much more to heart than if we try to dictate what it is we're going to do.
That just sounds fabulous. And I know when we talked before, you talked about how Ren was like the cherry on top of other services, which I just thought was such a great analogy. I would love to hear, just explain how it is that Ren is the cherry on top.
Yes. So one day during an all-staff meeting, I had an employee that kind of said that, like, we're the bottom of the barrel because we are hiring peers. So most people where they have to mark, are you a felon? And then another person will never, ever look at your application, whereas we're like, welcome on in. You're part of the team. How do you identify as a peer? Great, you're hired. As long as, you can do the minimum requirements needed for that job. And so I said that I didn't feel like we were the bottom of the barrel because if you ask individuals that are in mental health or in substance use, you ask when they hit rock bottom, and it is oftentimes when they've ended up in the hospital or in jail. Their rock bottom is not hanging out here at Ren. It's a situation that's happened that led them usually to a hospital and then often, unfortunately, to jail. And that is their rock bottom. And so I think saying that we are the bottom of the barrel is kind of untrue. And so I said, in my opinion, for a lot of people, the bottom is the hospital. And while they get paid the most, they get the most prestige, hospitals are massive things and infinitely important and definitely a great starting point, but they are the cone, we'll say, of our ice cream, because they're definitely needed to catch everything, but it is the bottom. And I feel like then you need to kind of get your hierarchies of needs. You need somewhere to live. You need to have stable housing. You need to have food taken care of. All of these things are really important. And so you're kind of working your way up. And then I feel that once you're kind of stabilized and you're ready for that socialization and you're ready for those next steps in your journey, that's when Ren and a peer-ran organization is really a great opportunity. You've kind of gotten all of these other things taken care of. There's a lot of situations that have taken you to get here, and we are kind of the cherry on top right when you're towards the end kind of your journey, or at least doing really well in your journey at that time, because we are not prepared to deal with individuals that do need to be hospitalized. We do not have the medical staff on hand in order to help with those situations. And those things are extremely important and very needed. But I think oftentimes, unfortunately, my staff in even the political outlook on peer runs is that we are the least important, and we are kind of the lowest paid. But you can get a person set up with all of their needs. And if they are sad and isolated and have no friends and no social skills and have no way to go out and make those friends and those social skills, they are not going to stay on that recovery path. They are definitely going to be sliding back into old habits, old friendships, old things that are not healthy for them. And unfortunately, that just restarts that process of needing to be in a hospital or needing to be in prison or these kind of things. Whereas if you can identify that a peer-led organization does have a place and it is immensely helpful for people in keeping their stabilization at a very low cost, I think you can see where it's the cherry on top. We're able to get those people where they need to be, help them getting the services that they need, and do it for an extremely low cost. And not only does it empower those that are getting the services, it greatly empowers those providing the services. The change you can see in staff from going so unsure of themselves and feeling like they have nothing to offer to just, really loving life and understanding that their journey was worth something and that sharing that journey impacts other people and that they are changing the lives of other people. And so while I'm sure a surgeon at the end of a massive surgery comes out and feels very accomplished and they saved that person's lives, it's nice to be able to share that with my staff, but in a different way. Because what they do does impact people, and we do save lives, especially with suicide awareness and those kind of things, and ODing and that kind of stuff. So, understanding that just because somebody had made a wrong choice at some point along their life doesn't mean they're not able to fulfill huge amounts of improvement in their life and in other people's lives as well.
It sounds too like one of the things that you do is you provide connection to each other, to the community. And I know that I've heard before, and I'm a firm believer, that the opposite of, I'll say, addiction, mental health struggles is connection. Like connection is such an important part of recovery generally. So kudos to you and your organization on doing all of that. I want to kind of change topics right now because this is the Women's Roundtable, and I love talking to women in business and women executives. And women make up, I read the statistic that women make up 75% of the jobs in nonprofit, education, and philanthropic sectors, but women hold less than 75% of leadership positions in these organizations. So you became the executive director or CEO of your organization in 2019, right before COVID.
Yeah.
But I know that you had a pretty interesting path to leadership. And just talking to you before, I feel like your experience, strength, and hope, as we say, in this area could be really instrumental to others listening to this. So could you just tell us a little bit about what it was like and how you got to where you are?
It was hard, to be perfectly honest. I actually started at this organization as a favor to somebody I knew. The CEO was coming on and she had some concerns in the finance department. Education-wise, as you said at the beginning, I absolutely love going to school. I love colleges. I had planned on being a college professor. I just find colleges such a great place for help. So a lot of college background, but a lot of it was in psychology and mental health. And so my professional background was in banking. So this individual asked if I would come in, take a look at their finance department. I was actually asked to come on for 1 day a week for a month and kind of just assess their finance department, give them some insight into things that needed to be corrected, and kind of go on my way. I got here on day one and we fired the accountants by the end of that day, and they had a lengthy list of some concerns. And as probably seen in a lot of nonprofits, it was unfortunately not being ran like a business. It was being led by individuals that were very grassroots and very involved in the day to day. But they often say if you're working in your business, you are not working on your business. And that was extremely apparent in our nonprofit. And so after a couple of months, they actually ended up hiring me on as a regular full-time employee. And I took over their finance department. And as you kind of said, I kind of took a look around, and there was a lot of policies and procedures that needed to be in place. There was some people that were doing absolutely nothing really and had kind of just been hanging out and getting a paycheck for no reason. So we had to streamline some things, do a reorganization. I will tell you that does not make you a lot of friends in the organization. But it was something that was desperately needed to save this organization from going under. And then unfortunately, our CEO that had asked me to come in had a stroke. And so we then got an interim CEO, and that was not a good time. She stayed for pretty much exactly 1 year before the board let her go. Our CEO that had the stroke then came back in 2018, and at a limited capacity, unfortunately. And so I had been really helping run the organization behind the scenes for our interim CEO. I really ramped it up when our actual CEO came back. We wanted her last year. She was getting ready to retire to be as memorable as possible and as amazing as possible. So we did everything in the background we could to get her through that last year that she wanted to do before she retired. And then she did retire in April of 2019. I was named interim CEO, but they then immediately started a CEO search for another CEO, even though I had been technically running the organization kind of behind the scenes for 2 years. We had an individual who was, on our board, and they were really clear that they didn't want someone as young as me and that had at-home responsibilities because I was a mother running an organization. So basically I was too young and too female to hold the position officially that I had been doing for free for 2 years. And my daughter is also seriously mentally ill, so I do have a lot of at-home responsibilities. We have twins at home, so I have that as well. So I do understand the concern. However, it was something that I had been working towards. I had gone and got degrees and had planned on being a professional. And so to be told that was not going to be an option for me due to the fact of my age, even though I had worked really hard, or because I was a mom, was really devastating. And it made me question even if I should try to move forward.
Let me stop you right there. Let me guess. And let me get this straight. So you were too young and too female because you had at-home responsibilities that didn't make you an attractive candidate, notwithstanding the fact that you had been doing the work for the past 2 years, right?
Correct.
Okay. Let me just take a wild guess that this board member, who we're not going to name because we don't want to get involved in defamation, although it's true, let me take a guess that board member was male.
Very, very male.
Yeah.
And he very much wanted my job.
Oh, so that's interesting. So he wanted your job. He points this stuff out. I mean, you had to have felt terribly attacked. And you said you were questioning whether or not you were going to leave on your own.
Yes.
What happened? Obviously you're here, but tell us how that happened.
Well, I got mad. So basically because they couldn't prove that I was unqualified for the job because I was living and breathing the organization. So it was very difficult to say I didn't know the organization. They then decided to offer the position at less money than what I had already been getting paid. So I do have at-home responsibilities. I do have children with special needs, and we had decided between my husband and I that he would stay home and I would run the company so that way my children could continue to have a parent full-time at home and I could take on Ren. That's a personal decision in our family, has no bearing really, in my opinion, on whether or not I'm capable of running the company. And because of that, I did need to have a salary in which it covered both my salary I had already been making and my husband's salary, which was about $30,000 less than what our previous CEO had been making. And again, I had been doing the job for her in the background for the entirety that she was there. So I was asking for less money than the current CEO, and they then offered me the position, or didn't offer me the position, but offered the position in general at $3,000 less than I was already making in my current position. And so they were like, you can apply. We won't bar you from applying. However, this is what it's going to pay you, which would not have been enough to make sure that my children got taken care of and I could run a company at the same time. Because it was less than what I made, much less, not counting my husband's salary that we would be losing. And I then got mad because I was doing a lot of work and had been doing a lot of work for a lot of years without recognition and without the salary, which is so often, unfortunately. And so I put together a PowerPoint presentation for my board that acknowledged that I was unwilling to accept the position and I would decline to apply for it. I then, however, put together every other job I was doing as well that the new CEO, who was our VP of the board at the time, would need to either do or fill that position. And so I had been doing their HR department, I had been doing their IT department, their marketing, all of their fundraising, their grant writing, their entire finance department, plus the CEO position. So I had been running about 7 departments at that time. And so I said, well, you can move forward with the 75 for this individual if you would like to hire him. You are going to need about another $400,000 to replace me across the board because of how many departments I'm currently taking care of. Which then kind of brought to light what I was asking for was not an unreasonable amount. And not only that, I was bringing in my salary and grants. I was the only CEO that had ever brought in grants to the organization or anything else. And so I actually got really, really lucky. Another woman on my board stood up and felt that the gentleman was being unfair against me due to being a woman and voted that he be removed from the board due to his prejudice against women being in a leadership position. So he was asked to leave the boardroom and the board voted unanimously to remove him from the board at that time. And then was able to move forward with electing me as CEO. So, the biggest thing is just not giving up because that's kind of where I had gotten to. Like, I felt like I wasn't going to get anywhere. I had this entire board that wasn't supporting me. And, I felt like I had just done all of this work and worked really hard to build up a program and do the right thing for not only my employees, but for our members. And then was still not getting that recognition and ability that I felt like I should be given. And so I did. I felt like giving up. But it wasn't until I got mad that I was like, no, like I've done all these things. It's going to cost this organization so much money to replace me that it's going to hurt the organization even more. And maybe it is the mom in me. I was like, you're not allowed to do that to my members and my staff. These are my people and I'm protecting them. And then it was really nice to see that once that one member was the board member was willing to stand up and say, no, I don't agree with this. I don't believe in this. And it turns out the entire board felt that way. It's just nobody was willing to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. And so thankfully another woman did stand up and say, I think this is wrong. But she's not being considered simply because she's young and a mom.
Well, I want to thank you for your transparency on that. I think it's really helpful to hear that. And there's so many themes, that I hear in your story, that we talk about as women. I think that women regularly undersell themselves, and we don't ask for what we want. I don't know if you've ever read any of those books, like Ask for It, but I want to really commend you on doing your homework, setting boundaries, asking for what you want, and not underselling yourself, like not being willing to accept something that was, at its heart unacceptable. In addition to the fact that you were certainly being, the subject of discrimination. So thank you so much for your leadership and for your transparency and sharing your kind of amazing story and your amazing path to leadership. So that was in 2019. You took over. It was the pandemic. Obviously, I think that, you and your services, I think you were considered an essential worker at the start of the pandemic. So it's been quite a ride for you, in terms of, how it is that you came to leadership and, the time period in which you've been leading this organization. So, that being said, you mentioned before you have a 20-year-old with a serious mental illness, and I think you have some special needs. I think you said you have twins that are 10. I'm curious. It sounds like you have a supportive partner, which is great. But what are your thoughts? What is your key to success for work-life balance or balance at work and balance in your life, which may be different than work-life balance?
I can't say that it's always been great by any means of the imagination. Work definitely overtakes more of the life than it should. and it kind of depends on how the organization is going as to how balanced it gets. The biggest thing I can say is my husband, 100%. Like, we got together when we were babies. I think it was like 3 days after I turned 18 that we met. So we've literally known each other our entire adult life, pretty much. And he has known that entire time. Like, I was very dedicated to school. I was very dedicated to having a career and those kind of things. And he liked his job and he did well at his jobs, but he has always supported me going through school, going through my different careers, going through the leadership of Ren, and has always been there and never judged me for being like, I need you to take him to dance practice today. Like, I don't got time to do that. And he's always been there. The other thing is the love of my staff, to be perfectly honest. They will quite literally kick me out of the building because I will be trying to help everyone. And they're like, you have to be gone by 4. So I would say really, if it was left up to me, there would be zero balance. But my staff and my husband work together to force me out of the building and to where I need to be so that I can get to the things I need to be with my family. Because ongoingly, like, I need to leave at 4:00, but I have 5 people outside my door that have things I need to help them with. And so thankfully my staff will kind of step in and be like, we've got this covered. You have got to leave. So just sharing with your staff what the needs are, what my schedule is, what's going on with my kids. My twins are actually starting gymnastics tonight. And so my assistant knows that I have got to be out the door by 3:50 p.m. today in order to make their first class. And, just asking for help, I guess, is the biggest thing. Because if it's left to me, it wouldn't happen. But I have to be willing to ask for help and be like, I have to leave at this time in order to be a good parent for my children. And so, just admitting your inabilities to do things and asking for help and accepting that help when it's offered.
Yeah, it takes a village. It takes a village. And we can't do everything all the time. So I'm curious, what advice would you give to your younger self? Like, if you could go back in time, and talk to that younger professional, the 20-year-old or whatever, like what advice would you have for your younger self?
Just believing in yourself and not thinking you're stupid, basically. Like, it's so often where people will undermine you as you go through things, and then you carry that with you and you worry, like, am I making the right decision? Am I really smart enough for this? Do I really have enough skill for this? So just, believing in your intuition and believing in yourself, I think, is kind of the hardest thing. When I don't believe in myself and I don't listen to my intuition is usually when I regret it the most. And I think our intuition is something that is often used against women. Like, oh, you're so emotional. But I will say, when I do not follow that gut feeling, always regret it. So maybe we are a little more emotional. Maybe we are a little more in tune with what's going on in the world or the bigger picture. I don't know where the intuition comes from or why we have it, but I find that in my life, if, it's something that keeps popping up into my head or it's something that I just have a gut feeling about, I have regretted it every time going against it. And so I think if I could go back and tell myself, it's just like, when you have those gut feelings, go with them because they are usually correct. Unfortunately, I had to learn some things along the way with those gut feelings to start listening to them.
Yeah, well, it's a superpower, right? Our intuition. Yeah. But even when we have failures, even when we don't listen or when we mess up, it's always a learning experience. Like, there's no waste, right? No matter what it is. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately for others, like, ignoring my intuition has made me more confident in listening to it. And so it has definitely caused me to be even more passionate. So if I really feel deeply about something, it is very unlikely you're going to change my mind. And normally within a couple of weeks or a month, I'm like, and that's why we didn't do that.
100%. So what's coming up for the Ren Network? Like, anything special, any events, things that people should look out for?
So we actually just wrapped up our annual 5K at the beginning of this month. So every year at the beginning of March, we do an annual mental health 5K block party. My partner in crime here at work is big into exercise. He created a full gym because we have a full gym here on site for members. And so he's really big into the 5K. I am not a jogger. So I created the block party aspect of it. And so we get together and get out in the community and show that. So that happens every March. And then, up next for us is just continuing to grow. We're really excited to get back out in the community. Things are really opening up again from COVID and basically getting our name out there and known and having other people know that we're available. It's unfortunate, but a lot of case managers and people that are in charge of doing the referrals and getting people into our services do not know we exist. So I think the most important thing is getting our name out there and our services out there and letting people know that these types of services exist. And that's one of the reasons I think the PFRC with the referral department is so amazing is even if we can just get a couple of case managers to really refer over and know that it happens, it can benefit all of the peer and family runs in the state of Arizona because we're able to then kind of help them distribute out members and get them to other places that maybe fit them better geographically, or there's some that are more focused on criminal justice. There's some that are more focused on art. And so just getting case managers and psychologists aware that these services are out there because you have individuals that are calling their case managers and their counselors and their psychologists over and over and over and over again, looking to fill that void of isolation that they have. And what's sad is the people helping them don't realize that there's more help for that available. And so that's really what I want people to know is that, this is available to them, that it's a great service and that we can offer more help than the once a month come and talk for 30 minutes. You can come here every single day from 7:30 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. We'll feed you. We'll make sure you have clothes. We'll take care of all of those basic needs along with the socialization. And so it allows those counselors, those case managers, those psychologists to do other things that are for higher utilization and higher need individuals when we take care of that socialization aspect that others are trying to use them for.
I hear you. Well, let's hope that, maybe this podcast or, getting it out there will help you and your organization, spread the message, which is an important one about peer recovery. So where can people find you? If somebody wants to get in touch with you or learn more, where can they look?
Well, I definitely recommend the website, renaz.org, so renaz.org. We're also on kind of all of the social media. We're not cool dancing TikTok people yet, but we're on pretty much all the other social medias. Uh-huh. And then, if there's questions, just call. We can also always answer questions by email at info@renaz.org. Basically short of smoke signals, we're pretty much available.
That sounds great. Well, we ask everyone on the Think Factory this one final question, which is, what keeps you up at night?
Usually the finance department, to be perfectly honest. I stress a lot, and it's not because we don't have the funds. I've worked really diligently over the 4 years that I've been CEO to make it financially secure. But I think because when I got the organization, it was not financially secure. It continues to be one of my number one anxieties. Is I really feel the pressure of making sure my staff can take care of their family. And we are the number one provider of meals for over 600 members every single month, where they're getting breakfast, lunch, and then dinners on Thursday. And so, the stress that we feel of making sure we're taking care of our own family and keeping our own children fed is exponentially increased when you are in charge of a multi-million-dollar organization that is feeding all of these people and supporting all of these people, and then the families that you're supporting through payroll and all of these kind of things. And so I think that's where my most stress is. I always worry I don't want to mess up and disappoint all of these hundreds of people or impact all of these hundreds of people's lives in a negative way, especially when I've spent a decade working towards making their lives better. And so I think that's one of the reasons I focus on that the most. I'm not saying it's the most healthy thing for me to stress about, but it is definitely what keeps me up at night. It's just making sure that I can live up to my own expectation of taking care of the people I've been entrusted to take care of.
I hear you. Well, I want to thank you, April, for appearing on this podcast. It's been really great to have you and to learn more about the great work of REN. Be sure to check out the other Women's Roundtable podcasts so you can learn how women think big and grow their business. Thanks, April.
Thank you so much for having me.